Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the official YouTube channel of the Faculty of Natural Sciences of Eötvös Loránd University. My name is Attila Császár, and I will be one of the participants of this live roundtable discussion, lasting for about 45 hopefully quite interesting minutes. As part of our 3 days long section of the 35th National Scientific Students Association Conference, and taking advantage of the online nature of our OTDK conference, we, the organizers, planned 4 roundtable discussions for the lunch and dinner breaks of today and of tomorrow. These roundtable discussions are about the past, present, and especially the future of chemistry, chemistry being for all of us the central science. Most likely, we also share a common interest in understanding the role of chemistry in our culture. Chemistry is as much as we chemists make of it. Thus, we invited 4 past, present, and future presidents of chemical societies for these roundtable discussions. You are watching the second of these roundtable discussions. Let me introduce the participant of the first roundtable discussion. Our distinguished guest is Professor Angela Wilson, President-elect of the American Chemical Society. Welcome, Professor Wilson, and thanks for accepting our invitation. The further participants of this roundtable are Professor Ágnes Szabados and Professor István Szalai. We 3 are heads of the organizing and executive committees of the section Chemistry and Chemical Industry of the 35th National Scientific Students Association's Conference. It is our privilege to lead the discussion with Professor Wilson. Nevertheless, you, our audience, are not left alone. While you are watching this conversation via our YouTube channel, you can address questions to Professor Wilson, who is happy to answer them. In fact, I strongly encourage you to ask questions, and our moderators on the YouTube channel will notify us about these questions, and we will ask them from our guests. You may ask your questions either in Hungarian or in English, whichever you find more convenient. Before our guest would leave this channel, I would like to assure her that the questions will be asked to her by us in English. Next, let me introduce Professor Wilson to you. Professor Angela Wilson is a computational chemist. She is the John A. Hannah Distinguished Professor of the Department of Chemistry of Michigan State University, and she is President-elect of the American Chemical Society. Professor Wilson made significant and widely recognized contributions to an exact in silico, also called computational chemistry. The research of Professor Angela Wilson focuses primarily upon the development and understanding of computational methodologies and their application to outstanding problems of chemistry, the central science. Professor Wilson and her group applied the computational tools, mostly quantum mechanical and quantum dynamical methodologies, to an impressively wide array of topics: heavy element and transition metal chemistry, spectroscopy, catalysis design, protein modeling, drug design, understanding of diseases, environmental challenges, like those related to carbon dioxide and per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, abbreviated as PFAS, metal organic frameworks, green chemistry, and mechanical properties of materials of importance in areas such as aircraft design. So after this very brief introduction, I would like to, or we would like to ask questions from Angela. And the first question concerns her professional career, which centers around computational chemistry. So could you please let us know why you chose this particular field of chemistry as the one you would do your research in later on?
Thank you so much for the question, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. I really appreciate it. So in terms of why I chose computational chemistry, I really liked so many different areas of science. I always did. really enjoyed mathematics, enjoyed computer science, loved physics, and absolutely loved chemistry, particularly physical chemistry. Computational chemistry was a choice because it allowed me to really mix all of these areas together, but also be able to study organic chemistry, inorganic chemistry, so many different areas. And so I'm really all about versatility, and computational chemistry just has provided an amazing pathway towards versatility, everything from human health to mechanical design to, really in detail development of theoretical quantum mechanical methods. So thank you.
Yeah, that's so. What are the so what's the basic advantage of having these computational tools in chemistry?
The advantage of those is there's so many different advantages of those, but a couple of examples. One example is, the development of drugs, not in COVID times trying to develop vaccines, but in general trying to develop new medicines. The pathway takes a very, very long time, and often we can describe it as trying to identify a needle in a haystack. So we've got all these different possible options, and it's really difficult to study every possible option in the experimental laboratory. It's costly, it's very time consuming. And so what you can do with computation is you can really reduce the numbers of possibilities that you're looking for, and you can help drive experimental design in terms of, no, there's no point in testing those in the lab, and let's focus on these. Often, if you're dealing with substances that are more toxic, ones that are short-lived, it really provides some additional insight and sometimes provides information where you're probably not going to want to do a lot of experimental studies. So there's so many reasons to go into computation. These are just a few.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And now my next question is that this interview or discussion or conversation is part of the National Scientific Students Association biannual research conference, as you know. And so it is of interest to our listeners how you, a prominent researcher, educator, and president-elect of the American Chemical Society, view the scientific method, and how do you see the role of publications as part of this research process? So could you say a few words about this? Especially in relation to your relatively large group of students who receive training and do research under your guidance.
Well, with science, of course, there's so many challenges in terms of there's incredible problems that we need to solve. And of course, some of these problems take a lot of trial and error in terms of really trying to understand what works, what's the rationale behind why something is working or not working, and really trying to go through the discovery process. As a part of the discovery process, it's so important to make sure that we are tracking this and we do actually get to the point where we do publish our results. We don't always publish the negative results, which sometimes is too bad because it's unfortunate that people may be following our steps after us, but really it is so important to get our information out there. And communication is absolutely key to that. And it's not just a matter of we need to have this long-term public record. And part of that is having peer-reviewed publications where we do disseminate the information from the science that we're doing. And I'm not sure what other details you want me to go into along those lines.
Well, maybe let's do it this way, that maybe you could share a story about some pleasant or unpleasant surprises you experienced during your research career.
Yeah, so I think one thing is really important because I think, often when we're starting our careers, we see some superstars of science, and we believe that they're getting every single paper they write published, and every single time they try to get money for their research that it's supported, and that's not the case. I used to be head of the U.S. National Science Foundation, which is one of the biggest funders, the head of chemistry division, I should say, and it's one of the biggest funders of chemistry in the U.S. And I was always amazed when I saw there was many people who with Nobel laureates don't necessarily get funded. I've heard stories from Nobel laureates who get their papers rejected. And so sometimes it's a matter of trying to find the right journal. A story in my own background. We were so excited, and as a theoretical chemist, our papers do not necessarily go to Nature and Chemistry, these very broad journals. So we had submitted a paper to Journal of American Chemical Society. We thought it had broad applicability, very general, very important paper. And we submitted it there. And we got a rejection without even having the paper reviewed. And we were very frustrated by this. It was interesting because I was talking to the editor then at a conference several months later. And he said, oh, I'm trying to get a paper in Nature Chemistry. And he said, I really hope it gets in. And I said, oh, I have a great story for you. I said, there was this Journal American Chemical Society. I didn't tell him it was him right away. I said, there was this article we were trying to get into the Journal of American Chemical Society, and it was turned down. So we turned around and we submitted it to Energy and Fuels. It was turned down. It was published in Energy and Fuels, but turned down by JACS because we were told it was not of broad enough applicability. So with Energy and Fuels, ACS Press Packs picked it up. It's basically this team at American Chemical Society that picks up the top 5 or 6 articles out of all ACS journals that they think are of really importance to the broader community. They picked up our article, and after that, my postdoc was interviewed by somebody at the New York Times. It was featured in over 200, 300 venues online, news media, all of that. And so I think it's really an important lesson that just because one person does not think your work is really kind of broadly applicable, it doesn't mean that it's not. If you feel it is, continue to pursue. And sometimes rejection is the best thing. I was really happy to have my paper rejected. There's no way it would have had such a broad footprint. We even had companies calling us up to try to figure out how to actually apply what we had suggested. So.
Well, I think this is a good lesson also to the students who also struggle, just like their supervisors, where to publish and what to do when someone rejects that paper. Now I see that Agnes has questions, so let's turn to Agnes.
Yes, let me take over the questioner role, and we would switch the topic a little bit. We would ask you about the American Chemical Society, of which you are president-elect, which means you are not yet president, but you are already involved in the organization matters. And our first question would be that we know that ACS has been very active in promoting the future of chemistry and watching over our discipline evolving in the 21st century. So could you please briefly summarize what you think, how this will happen?
So thank you for this question. So, you know, there's so many challenges in terms of the future of chemistry, but I think chemistry is so central to so many of the challenges that we have globally. We can look at the UN Sustainability Goals. The UN Sustainability Goals, so many of them are indeed very much, chemistry is very central to those. American Chemical Society has over 155,000 members. We are now opening up a new membership route where people can actually join for free, which will be opening up next year. So that really provides, it's not quite a full-blown membership, but it certainly provides an opportunity to stay engaged in many ways, no matter what area if you've got a chemistry foundation, you go into other areas, it certainly provides some nice links. But ACS and, you know, is so focused on so many of the things towards the future, you know, back to the UN Sustainability Goals, really thinking about, you know, having a much greater understanding of our actions and how they have an impact on our environment. You know, as chemists, we really need to take even greater control of this. And I think this is really going to play an important role in the future, and much more through innovations necessarily than through scientific policy. I know in the US right now, there's a lot of push on the scientific policy side, but really we've got to have the innovations in place to really have these types of considerations be very successful. I think there's going to be a lot more push on recycling, reuse, or replacing some of our much more rare elements, rare for various reasons. Sometimes they truly are rare. Sometimes they're rare for more geopolitical reasons. Some of the critical elements, for instance. You know, things like machine learning, artificial intelligence, you know, these are going to play an incredibly important role in the future as we go to much more data-driven discovery of materials, discovery of new drugs, discovery of new, you know, alternatives to plastics or different types of plastics, catalysis. All of this is really going to be very much, you know, based upon and focused a lot on data-driven. If I can give any advice to younger chemists, budding scientists, it's to make sure, even if you don't have to go into computational chemistry, but make sure you have a really firm grasp and firm background in computer science areas, because I think that's really the future, even in chemistry and physics and so many different areas. A lot of high throughput will be a focus. Things like robotics, you're beginning to see a lot of these industry make more use of these, and a lot more smart robotics as well, I think, are going to be really important. Faster design of therapeutics, molecular medicine, much more personalized medicine is also going to be very important. Looking much more at manufacturing and how can we ramp up manufacturing more quickly. This is very much related to chemistry, chemical engineering, and I just think there's so many different areas like this that are really going to be an important part of our future.
So if you had to suggest a part of chemistry for a 20-year-old to learn, would you name one, or would you tell that it doesn't really matter because challenges are there in every discipline?
I would definitely go with the latter, that there's challenges in every discipline. We can't have everyone become a computational chemist or organic chemist or analytical chemist. We really need all different flavors. And one of the things I think is so important is that just because you get trained in an area doesn't mean that's the area that you're going to be working in. When I was going through all of my training, I never did anything on drug design, proteins, any of that. I was much more physics-oriented, chemistry and physics-oriented than so much on the bio side. But 10 years ago, I'm a ways into my career, and 10 years ago, I was approached by a company that said, hey, if we provide you with some support, would you try doing this? Would you be willing to spend the time on this? And I was like, okay, because I think we continue to evolve and continue to learn new things. I never thought I'd be working with, the Air Force and Lockheed Martin on looking at aircraft design. I mean, I've, largely studied small molecules, that's how I was trained. And so, as you go through your career, it's that foundational knowledge that is really important and you build upon. And I think that another piece of advice I'd really give to students is make sure, even if it's a class you don't like or material that you don't like, learn it well once so you don't have to go back and learn it again, because you may actually need it for some aspect of your future, regardless of career pathway. And I think that's really important.
Yes, this is a very important take-home message that we try to stress all the time, I would say. I think we can all look back at classes and there's things that we do not want to repeat again. And so, yes. And then if we haven't really focused, I mean, I've had to go back and relearn some things that I wish I had really mastered much more first time out. Yeah, there are some of those, definitely. So if we switch a little bit our point of view towards ACS, could you name challenges for ACS during your presidential term?
So, a big challenge that we're all facing now is the fact that so much networking, it's really important in the sciences, and it's, the opportunity to get together, to meet, to talk about science, to brainstorm ideas together. We're not having these in-person meetings for the most part. And so trying to figure out new venues. Of course, we're using Zoom, but it's not quite the same. And so one of the things that ACS is continuing to grapple with is, how do we try to, really provide opportunities for people virtually who do not, have the opportunity to get together, but also do it, for people in person as well. So a lot of focus on hybrid. One of my big concerns right now is that if we look globally, there are a lot of students, postdocs, others who have missed out on opportunities, on research opportunities, summer opportunities. It may not be that way in Hungary. It's certainly been that way in the US. I've had students who were supposed to come from Germany and work with me. They were unable to come. And so we've got this kind of a little bit of a stoppage or slowdown in terms of some gaps in learning, some gaps in training and education experiences. Some of the students here we've had to train online. They've done online labs, which are just not the same as doing it doing it in person. And so just trying to identify some ways to make sure that people are ready, they have the opportunity for the next step in the careers, to make sure that we're trying to cover up some of these gaps in terms of training, and also trying to provide as many opportunities as we can, as people go through these different steps in their careers. I think that's one of the real big challenges over the next year and a half. I think another challenge is really, trying to improve the communication with the public. We've seen, lots of interesting stories in terms of COVID and COVID vaccines. And, part of this is medical, part of it is certainly chemistry, and trying to make sure that we have got good, reliable sources that people can turn to regularly in terms of sources of information about science in the future, and making sure that this focus on science doesn't go away. We want to make sure, we've seen our Sputnik moments, we've seen other things through the years in terms of a focus on science, and then it dissipates very quickly. We've got so many challenges with the UN sustainability goals. We need to make sure that this focus on science is a continuous focus and continuous investment and continuous interest. So.
Do you feel the need of increasing the interest from the side of the society in science? So, was there a decrease or a drop that you need to make up for?
In the U.S., indeed. It's interesting because as part of my ACS role, I do have the opportunity to speak with U.S. legislators. And I know every country, different things are going on in terms of the viewpoints of science. But in the U.S., it was very interesting because I was talking to a member of the House of Representatives, and her brother is a scientist. And she pulled me aside after the meeting with her about a year ago, and she said, science is now viewed as a special interest. And this was pre-COVID. And she said, there has to be more advocacy and more discussion with the public and legislators about the importance of science. Well, along comes COVID. So of course now we see it, everyone sees it, but let's hope that doesn't wane. We need to make sure that people realize that all of these global challenges, we want to talk about trying to address UN sustainability goals. Chemistry is at the forefront of this. And so we need to make sure that these conversations are happening. Definitely, very important.
I see. Yes, it's a sad, how to say, consequence of the pandemic we are living. There is another question about the American Chemical Society that we would be interested in if you could provide some insight. And that would touch upon the structure and especially the finances of ACS. So there is a considerable financial strength of ACS, and how and in what terms does it help to fulfill all the roles it has?
So ACS has its funding from a number of different sources. One of them is certainly through the years through chemical abstract services, as well as from the journals. And so, membership fees is only a very, very, very small percentage of, of basically the ACS operating budget. The funding that has come in through these other sources has been really important in terms of being able to invest in programs, ACS programs offered online, in person, everything from bridge programs to high school research programs for students who are from underprivileged backgrounds, to outreach programs through kindergarten through high school age students. And so, this background, this financial piece, it really goes back into the membership and really back into promoting science, promoting chemistry, not only nationally, but globally as well. And of course, investing and not necessarily investing in terms of relationship building. Partnerships are absolutely critical with other chemical societies across the globe. Very important.
Thank you very much. I would say that offering the free membership was a really good idea in the times we are living. I wonder if the pandemic was behind this decision too.
No, actually, that has been going on for a while because many students go through chemistry degree, then they go into another area, and we'd really like to have them have the opportunity to still continue to be a part of ACS, make use of some of the resources, even if they decide to go off and become a physician or go off in some other area. often folks, when they do and go into another area, don't necessarily want to kind of reach back and still be a part of the society, but this provides them with a link. And I think it also provides us with a bigger footprint and a bigger voice. We do talk about some of these globally so important issues.
Thank you. I see that Attila has a
If I may jump in just for a quick question. I mean, you gave some nice and good advice to students. So I'm trying to be a little bit selfish and asking you, also because ACS also provides curricula for education in chemistry. So do you see that the curricula, how we educate chemists and chemical engineers, which is a little bit overlapping now in the US, I guess, would change? So what changes would you like to see, and what changes will happen in the short term in the curricula?
So I'll be honest, the ACS has got so many committees. I visited many of them. I've not had a chance to have so many discussions on the education front in terms of the curriculum development. But, the curriculum development, I know that group is very, very active, and it's something that they continue to revisit and try to have that evolve. We have so many challenges now because there are so many different interdisciplinary areas and other areas that have kind of spawned off chemistry. And we've talked about the data science and that area as well. So I have no doubt that things are going to continue to change. How rapidly, I'm not sure. But indeed, the group is rather proactive in terms of trying to address that, but without always saying, okay, great, you changed your program, let's go ahead and change it again. And so it's not that frequent, but they do try to revisit it from time to time and say, okay, now's the time where we really got to see how can we bring in some of these other things without requiring students to take a lot of additional courses. How can we bring this in in some lab components? How can we bring in some of these newer topics that are very important?
Okay, well, thank you. And I see that István has questions.
Thank you, Attila. So we already touched a little bit, but I would like to know your opinion about the role of communication and communication skills in science, and especially we are in a conference, a student conference. So what do you think? How can one achieve a successful presentation? And if you would share some of your special tricks, how do you build your own presentations? That would be
okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very loaded question. Many, many different parts there. So, in terms of my own presentations, when I got started, what I tell, because I have a research group of about 25 people, all the way from high school students to postdoctoral fellows. And so, what I always tell them is, for that first few talks, until you really feel comfortable giving talks and you're making sure you're covering all your bases, is to make sure that you write out your story. This isn't to read the story, and I always tell my students never read the story, but it's at least to make sure that every point that they want to make is also reflected in the slides that they're creating. And it also provides them with a way to make sure that they know they're making the points they want to make. In the very first of, it's very important to make sure you get that first 30 seconds, 60 seconds down. Make sure your points, tell them what you're going to tell them. What are the 3 main points for your presentation? Repeat it throughout your presentation and end it as well. And so if you've got that format, I think that's very, very helpful. I think it's really important to be able to talk about your science in several different ways. One of them is to be able to give a conference presentation. Great. But what if you meet somebody in the elevator? Years ago, I met one of the Nobel laureates in the elevator. And I truly had to give my elevator pitch. What are you working on? I knew I had about 90 seconds to tell them what I was working on. Yeah. So you never know. You've got to be ready with being able to convey your research in a 2-minute period. Can you do that? And that's another one of those. When you're first trying to do that, write it down. Write it down, cut out the extra words, all of that, and get that pitch down. I think it's really important. I also think it's really important to gauge your audience. Are you talking to other people who are also organic synthetic chemists, if that's what you're doing? If so, you can talk at their level and make some assumptions in terms of what they know. Are you talking to people who are completely new in the area? Are you talking to the public? And I can tell you that that is the area where most scientists really have a problem. And I encourage you to really try to, if your parents aren't scientists or your friends aren't scientists, start practicing talking to them about your science and keep working on it until they say, I understand, and not just tell you I understand because they don't want to hear you talk about it anymore, but tell them you really, truly understand. It's interesting because in the US, there was this Alan Alda Communicating Science program. And when I was head of the National Science Foundation Chemistry Division, our whole chemistry division went through this training. And it was interesting as we began to start trying to tell our research stories. So many of us started off our discussion about, well, in the periodic table. And they said, no. Many in the public don't remember what the periodic table is. And so you have to kind of back it down even beyond that. And while I was also head of the chemistry division at NSF, for every single award, so I looked at about 5,000 different proposals while I was at NSF, and every single one of them has to have a paragraph that describes science to the general public. And I can tell you that over 90% of the scientists are not able to do that. And so if you are able to do that, you'll have an endless possibility of careers because you can bridge that gap. Even if you're going in a very technical area, if you're able to bridge that gap with whoever you're working with, it'll make a world of difference in your career.
Oh, thank you. I don't know, Agnes, do you want to ask something? I see your hand. No. Okay. Another part of career, so you had several high-level positions at different organizations. And different responsibilities. So when you accept such challenging position, what is your motivation? And what is your trick to manage your large organization, like ECS, whatever? So why are you motivated to do such things which makes, so it limits your time for research, definitely, I guess.
So first of all, I feel that I'm more successful because I do so many different things that I enjoy. And so because of that, I'm driven in many areas. And so having these different outlets, because honestly, while I was a postdoctoral fellow, I love the research, but I really miss some of these other dimensions that I had. I'd been through leadership training before, a lot of leadership. I've had some leadership roles even before that. I've taken management classes. So there's many different dimensions that I like. And so through the years, these opportunities have just been, it's nice to be able to kind of have all of those things going at one time. I feel like it's just kind of who I am and how I'm most successful is having these different avenues. I also think one of the things for me when I've been, asked to consider these opportunities is that for me, there was a point in my career, I was trying to be at the same place at the same time as my spouse, as my husband. And it's difficult to do sometimes. You can't always go to the best places because there may not be a job for both of you. He was a military pilot, and there was only certain places where he could live. And so I ended up in Oklahoma City, which, you may not have heard of it. It's not exactly a place that has a lot of positions in physical chemistry. And so I had a lot of temporary positions there for a while. I even left the field for a while. But, there was people looking out for me. I was able to get a small grant opportunity through the National Science Foundation. And also a lot of the connections I made were from my local American Chemical Society section. And so then when I had the opportunity later in my career to be a part of NSF and to play a bigger role in the American Chemical Society, I'm such a believer in these organizations that I really appreciated those opportunities. I've also been vice president for faculty at a university of over 40,000 students, and just the things that I wish I was told as a junior faculty member, I had a chance to implement and really try to help out other people in their careers. And so for me, it's a part of me. I like to manage. I like to do those things. And I think there's nothing wrong with saying that. And I like to work with budgets and things like that. But I also like to give back and see other people thrive in chemistry. But I also like to have my own research going as well. So.
Thank you. we have some difficulties in Hungary to find enough students in chemistry. I don't know how popular is chemistry, science in general in at the moment in the US.
Yeah, I think that's a real challenge, because people look at areas like, they look at areas like business and computer science, and they see these lucrative pathways. But quite frankly, just because you go into science doesn't mean you can't go down those pathways. You go into science, you've got so many more pathways, and I think that's really important. It's funny because I was working on a master's in business administration degree many years ago, and the person who helps this MBA students find jobs was so excited when I stepped in the door, because he said, "I cannot wait to try to place you." I mean, I did move then to Texas and start a faculty position, so I never, he never had that opportunity. I'm like, I really want to do faculty position, but he was like, "You're going to have so many opportunities." And he said, "I am just so excited to have that science background combined with anything else is just really important." Students don't necessarily see that. They don't necessarily see the pipeline. It's hard work initially, but in the long term, it is a wonderful life. Going down, a scientific pathway, and just the opportunities available to you as a scientist are just so phenomenal. I think one of the things is, as chemists, as scientists, we're often kind of closed. We don't necessarily tell our personal stories and our pathways and talk about the rewards of being a scientist. And I think students need to hear these stories so much more often. We're so much about business. We're so much about the science. We're so much, and we are. But these personal stories of why we love science so much and why it's been such a wonderful career, and that, yes, you can get compensated quite nicely as a scientist, these stories don't come out.
Okay, thank you. I let Attila to ask. Thank you.
So thank you. You basically started to say something about my next question, but I still ask it.
Okay.
And that is, I mean, it's. I think it's important for everyone what you just said, but maybe you can elaborate some more. So could you please say a few words about how successful researchers can balance their professional and personal lives?
Right. So thank you for that question. It's interesting, especially if you look at successful women in science. Often you see, you hear about these ones that don't have kids, or they never talk about their kids. I have two kids in high school, 16-year-old and a 14-year-old. She'll be 14 tomorrow. And I have been the soccer mom. Thanks. And my son just started driving. Oh my. Anyways, I've been the soccer mom. I've been a soccer coach. I've coached soccer 9 times. I'm a Zumba instructor. I've coached basketball. I've coached cheerleading. So, it is possible to kind of have this balance in life. It seems like there's never a time for it, but there is. And sometimes you don't find the time until the baby's born, or whatever the case might be, but there's indeed time to have that balance. And I think, my motto has always been kind of work hard, play hard. I've had the opportunity to travel, I see family, but I am working, I'm working late, I get up early sometimes and work, but it's really worthwhile. I think, chemistry is a very versatile career, and I'm really glad that I went that route, but I'm delighted to have a family and have that aspect of life as well. So it is definitely, possible to have that balance. So.
Yeah, of course. Yes, thank you. So we have some questions from the audience. So this is a little bit back to earlier questions. And so you mentioned that data and computers will be very important in the future. We think they are now, but maybe they become even more important in the future. So are these things already included in compulsory courses, in curricula of chemistry degree in the US? So how important part of data and computers are in the life of chemists?
You know, the challenge in the U.S., there's such a variety of institutions. There's everything from community colleges, small four-year universities, major universities. And so, you know, the experience really varies from university to university, not even just type of university. And so I would say some places, some of this is incorporated in some of the labs. I remember years ago, I had some, you know, computerized component to, you know, a more advanced instrumentation lab that I had ages ago. But now I think there's so many other ways you can pick it up without necessarily taking a formalized class. So if you don't have it at your institution, you can take a class at Coursera for free. There's all types of data science courses. Some of them start at this level. Some of them are much more entry level. You know, some of the folks in my research group have kind of gone that route. It's like, I don't want to take another course. Or they may invite, you know, ask a computer science professor if they can attend some of their classes. So there's many different ways to come up and pick up some of this insight. You know, it'd be great to be able to include it in the curriculum, but, you know, there's only so many classes we can take. And so that's, you know, that's always a challenge. We've got to get that core chemistry knowledge, but it sure would be nice if we had some of this additional knowledge as well. You know, I've talked to leaders at a number of major chemical companies, and they've said they really would like to have people who know the chemistry, but also know the data science. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, there's, I think there's different ways we can pick that up without necessarily, if you don't have the class available, it's not the end of the world. You can look for it online.
Okay, thank you. But it's an important part of chemistry, as we all agree. So let's see Agnes's questions.
I'd like to pick up partly on something that you mentioned before, and that was involvement that you have a large group. And the youngest, maybe high school student or students. Are there any, I mean, especially in your profession, I think, as a computational chemist, this is especially a challenge to involve high school students in research. So do you see any special challenge in this respect?
Well, I think what's really important is, you know, if there's motivated high school students, I think it's possible. I've worked with over 60 high school students in my research through the years. You know, they've been authors of papers. One of them was recently an author in a paper that was a cover article for a journal. And so it really, you know, you have to give them each their own project, but it's a project that's like a component of a larger project. So they've got a graduate student or someone that they feel comfortable going to on a day-to-day basis to be able to ask questions. In that light, it's also very good training for a graduate student who's thinking about education. But it's got to be a strong, motivated high school student. So it's not just question every single step of the way. It's got to be ones who really want to dig in, try to learn, and are really working hard at it. And I think that's really important.
I think this is especially important for us. We have one contestant here at our conference who submitted her work as a secondary school student, as we call it here. So another question that is somewhat related to this one is the importance in your point of view, so-called role models, figures that we tend to look up to and to follow, how important they are in research and in personal life, and in at what extent are they related, or are they related at all?
I think having role models is really important. You know, I look back, and the first, I don't think I encountered a female chemist until I was in graduate school. And I really would have liked to have, and I didn't even know any that well at that point in time. And I would have really liked to be able to interact with some, to hear about some of the challenges they may have had in terms of, you know, trying to find two people, you know, jobs, you know, you've got a spouse, you're married, you're trying to find jobs for both of you. What kind of career pathway did you have to go to? I think things like that are really important. Did you have a family? How did you manage that? And it doesn't have to necessarily be another female. It just needs to be someone that you can talk to about these things. And I think those of us who are more senior, really have a responsibility of trying to share a few more of our stories, so then students can better identify with, hey, when I hit these, because all of us hit rocks, hit rocks along the way. We have no pathway is smooth. It's lovely to presume that people have a smooth pathway, but I don't think anyone has a smooth pathway. And so just trying to identify with somebody who maybe has gone through some of those things before, not because every experience is identical, but at least to have an inkling of kind of what they went through and how they navigated it and how they got through it, and how they're the success they are today. I think that is really helpful, and it's really motivating when you hit those points, those obstacles in the road throughout your career or throughout your education even. So,
do you have conversations from time to time of this sort in your group or with your group members? So do they approach you in this, with these questions?
My students have asked me, it's pretty open door. I've heard all kinds of questions about all kinds of things. And so, we do talk, and I do try to, if it's a pathway or experience that I've not had, I try to, if I know somebody else who's had a similar experience or pathway, I try to kind of, point them in that direction and try to do the introduction so they can have that conversation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I think Attila is next.
Okay.
Well, yes, thank you. The point is that time flies, and we had like 45 minutes discussion, wonderful discussion, and you shared very nice stories and gave very nice advice to I hope a large group of people. And we are not out of questions, but there is the next program which people need to attend, although this is already in the evening, but there is a competition in videos. High school students submitted some videos, and the video will come up on the channels of our conference. So instead of a question, I would like to thank you for accepting this opportunity to present your research, some parts of your life, and talking about ACS to our students and all the listeners of our YouTube channel, and hope there will be another occasion when we can talk about these things, maybe in front of a similarly large audience or so. And thank you very much, and have a nice day, and thanks for being with us. And thanks for all the listeners on the YouTube channel, and we will continue with the third part of this 4-part discussion tomorrow at 1 p.m. So thank you for listening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
For the opportunity. Thank you. Bye.